The best part about working on Into Badlands is making a show that we know is different than anything out there, and being kind of original, because it's a weird show. It's a mashup of a whole bunch of different genres. But our main goal was to bring like Hong Kong style action to American television, and I think we did that obviously in season 1 really well. And so what's really fun working on it is to be able to do that. Is just to constantly be shocking and amazing people like with every episode, and that's a fun thing, especially when I've been doing this for like 20 years now, and you kind of not get jaded, but you do genres and they're kind of the same and people have seen it before. When you do something really special and original and you build up a cool fan base and a really different, diverse fan base that you've never really had before, it's really interesting, exciting, and fun, and it makes it much more, you just get more passionate about working on it. Yeah, I think that was our main goal, and I think that's still one of our main focuses. But of course, we're still trying to make a good show, and an original show at that. So it being a genre mashup, so you've got kind of cowboy elements, you've got martial arts movie elements, you've got the steampunk stuff, you have this post-apocalyptic thing, and it's all jammed together. We've seen all these things separately before, but not jammed together. And I would say first season we were getting our leggings, and it didn't necessarily click together, but I think season 2 we figured out what the mistakes were and we moved on from there, and I think we were able to up the game a lot this season. So that was a really exciting part about doing it. But I think, yeah, what was the original question again? Yeah, I mean, that's the fun part. That's the really fun part, is that we know when we're doing all this stuff that most people haven't seen this kind of stuff on television before. I mean, there's, of course, people who watch the wuxia films and have been watching that all their whole lives, but I think there's people in Middle America that have never seen this in their lives entirely. And so to be able to blow their minds with this kind of like really dynamic hyper action is cool, it's fun. I think one of them, we were very limited with our location because we were in New Orleans. And so the show really wants to be really epic and grand because we were talking about world building, right? And we're talking about a world that's inside the Badlands and a world outside the Badlands. But because we were in New Orleans, it was very limiting in terms of the geography, because everywhere you go is just fucking swamp and more swamp, right? It's just, there's nothing else, right? There's no mountains, there's nothing. And so moving our whole crew to Ireland this season changed everything for us. So because you have mountains, forests, rivers, everything within like half an hour of our base camp. So you can get a whole bunch of different looks and you can make it more epic. We can do much wider cinematography. What am I trying to say? We can do much wider what is the word I'm trying to get out? Much grander shots with the locations we have and not limited by the locations. So that was one thing. I think with costume design, we really upped the game also this season. I think last season they weren't really sure what it was we were going for. This season they really knew what they were going for. And then also character development and story this season. I think the writers now, I always knew what the show was, but I think the writers kind of wasn't sure. And so now this season, by breaking up the characters, separating them, we have multiple storylines, but all heading towards one main goal, which is you feel the momentum of the show is going to a certain climax for the end of the season. That helped also with the storytelling a lot. I think a lot of the times last season there was characters that weren't fully developed or fully fleshed out. I think this season we do that all with all the characters. Plus having 10 episodes makes it much more room to do that stuff. No, I mean, it was always meant to be a journey for Sunny, this character. It's very loosely based on Journey to the West, and what we mean by loosely based is that the Monkey King is given this mission to take the Buddhist scriptures from India to China, right? And it's not just about that. It's about this journey that he goes through on the way with this group of people that they're in charge of doing this. And each kind of bit of adversity that they run into is a metaphor for life. And it's a journey that by the end of it, the Monkey King himself changes. In the beginning he's a petulant, rebellious character, and by the end he becomes enlightened. And so what we wanted to have that same kind of character arc for Sunny. And so the first season, unlike the Monkey King, Sunny's more of a cold-hearted killer with not much feelings. But the fact that he is now, his girlfriend is about to have a baby, that changes everything, because all he's done in his whole life is take lives. And suddenly he's created a life, and that's kind of emotionally changed something in his head. And so because of that starts this little seed that creates this journey path for him. And this season is all about getting back into the Badlands. He's been taken out of the Badlands, getting back into the Badlands, finding his girl who's been kidnapped, basically, and the baby that might have been born. He doesn't even know if it's been born yet. And so to make the family union, to get away from what he was, being a cold-hearted killer, and becoming, a better person, and can he even achieve that? And so that's really kind of the change for Sonny. And I think last season was a setup of what Sonny was like before, and this season is kind of, you see the change happen within him. Totally, and I think the writers, maybe even because of my personal life, know that and put that element in there. But yeah, if I didn't have a kid, I don't know if I would be able to play the character with as much emotion as I would if it was 10 years ago. The idea of having a kid versus actually having a real kid and dealing with that every day, and the fact that I would literally kill for my kid. I mean, this is me, Daniel Wu, saying this. I would, I've done certain things that happened with her that I've just done stuff where that's not typically in my personality, but you just do it because you have a family, and it's as a male in the family, you're the protector, right? And so you naturally, these things happen to you, and you wouldn't be able to recreate that necessarily as an actor on your own. There's a true feeling of that. So I've done, I started doing Shaolin Kung Fu when I was 11, and that was because when I was 7 I saw Shaolin Temple, which is Jet Li's first movie, right? And that blew me out of the water. I remember my grandfather took me to Chinatown, the Great Star Theater in San Francisco, and he was like, all that stuff you've been watching before, I used to watch Kung Fu theater every Sunday when I was a kid. And he's like, that stuff was fake. This is the real deal. And so I saw it. There's, the amazing thing in that movie is there's this training scene where they're doing all these weapons and all this stuff, and I remember that scene very clearly. It was that's what I want to do. They're doing praying mantis. They're doing they're all different styles within this 5-minute scene, and so I was a hyperactive kid. My parents didn't want me to. They thought I would get in fights and stuff at school, so they didn't want me to learn. And it wasn't until my mom found my first teacher, Y.C. Chang, in El Cerrito, California, and he became my first teacher. He wasn't just a Kung Fu teacher. He was a Qigong master, Tai Chi master, Chinese brush painter, calligrapher, Chinese medicine doctor, as well as lawyer. So he was a very well-rounded Renaissance man, And so I think that really kind of pulled me into learning martial arts and learning more about my culture, I think. So I started training with him. I trained with him for many years, and then he wasn't into competition at all, and I wanted, at 17, 18, you want to prove yourself. So I wanted to start competing, and so then I switched over. I kept training with him, but I also trained with another coach, a Wushu coach. I switched over to Wushu with a coach named Zhang Hongmei, and she was, women's national champion when Jet Li was men's national champion, and she married an American, Philip Wong, who's also a really good Wushu practitioner, was on the U.S. team. They started a school, and so I started training with them for many years, and so that was the basis, the foundation for my martial arts. And then over time, I've learned boxing, Muay Thai, and a bunch of other things, Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu a little bit, but I'm more of a striker, so I'm not really a grappling type of guy. But yeah, I mean, martial arts has been a part of my life, whether it's been in the movie business or not. And in fact, when I first started the movie business, I actually tried to keep it out of my career because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just a martial arts guy. And then eventually, worked it back in. And so that we have with Badlands, it's back in my life. It actually really depends on your teacher, because I think now with MMA and UFC and all that stuff, people totally just drop the spirituality side of martial arts completely. It's all about training and the physical side and winning. And that's not what martial arts is about at all. It's about spiritual cultivation, right? And so the philosophy all goes along with that. And I got the philosophy side really early on because my teacher, my first teacher, Y.C. Chang, he was a devout Buddhist. He studied a lot of that philosophy, and so every Sunday he would give lectures on martial arts philosophy, on health, because he was a Chinese, practiced traditional Chinese medicine as well. So like what to eat in different seasons, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. How to do tea ceremonies, everything. I mean, everything that was culturally related to the martial arts, he would teach us. And so that's where I got that. And then I also got, when I was like 14, I got into the Carlos Castaneda books, those books, which are not anything to do with martial arts, but the teacher-student relationship and spiritual journey was I saw the parallels between that and martial arts, and so then that was something that I got into. And then funny enough, that's stuff that we're actually using in Badlands now. The things that MK, the character MK, goes through in the training and dealing with his dark chi and all that stuff is ideas that I took from way back then, like those books and stuff when I was studying martial arts as a young kid. And put it into it. Because one of our goals is like, yes, it's really fucking cool that we kick a lot of ass on this show and there's blood flying everywhere and blah, blah, blah. But we also want to keep the spiritual element in there as well. We want to kind of undo what MMA is doing, which is just showing the fighting. So the spiritual journeys that the characters go through go in tandem or parallel with their martial arts journey as well. And it may be not as obvious, but it's there in the subtext. So at least responsibly, we've been doing that. But I think it's really important. I think it's important for people to understand martial arts. It's a whole system, and it's not just one-sided thing. It's not just about fighting. When we pitched it to them, that's what they wanted. They didn't want just the straight up violence. They wanted it to be tied into something cultural or spiritual or whatever, to give it some substance, right? Because if you want a successful show, it can't just be cool fight scenes and then really crappy drama in between. It's like porn otherwise, right? You kind of skip forward, skip all the drama, and then just watch the fight scenes or the action scenes. And so we want to make a really well balanced show, and in order to do that, you have to tie in that spirituality element into the storytelling. It's totally different. Like the only way we knew we could pull this off was by bringing in a Hong Kong team. So Master Didi, who's our choreographer, he worked on hundreds of great classic Chinese films. But then he's known in the West for working on Matrix, Crouching Tiger, and all that other stuff. And so he has a lot of experience working in East and West, right? Then he brought his team of stuntmen in, and then we have our action director, Stephen Fung, who directed all the visuals of the fight scenes. So all that, the whole system is really a Hong Kong system that we plugged into the American television system. And the reason why it has to be a Hong Kong system is because we do it fast, right? Americans, especially shooting action, is a bit slow. But what they do is you do the choreography, then the DP is completely separately does the coverage, right? So you got to do the same scene, the same whole full action scene over and over and over again while he does all the coverage. And then the editor then assembles the fight in the editing room. And it's a lot of the times it may not even correlate properly. What you're seeing on screen is actually not the choreography. It's been re-edited and put in a way. Where you do the completely opposite. Every shot is a specific shot made for that bit of action, that sequence of action. And we go through the fight chronologically. So we go from shot to shot to shot to shot, like it's a storyboard, but we have no storyboards. And it's all designed for that specific shot. So there's no switching of shots. It has to be that way. And then in fact, we edit it ourselves and then turn it into the editor as a reference for them to how to assemble it, basically. And so we do the whole package, basically. Every fight scene is done by our fight unit. Then we hand it off to the main unit to plug into the rest of the story. Yeah, I think they're comparable, but I mean, we have a lot less time to do them. Each episode is, we're given 8 days to shoot, so that's the drama and the action, right? And some episodes, like the first episode of this season, there's like four fight scenes, right? And so we have to balance it over the longer period of time, but usually you have to get all that action in within the 8 days, and that's a very short amount of time. For most Western action shows, they probably spend a day on an action scene, right? We spend at least 2 to 3 days, up to 6 to 8 days, depending on the scene, how big it is and how involved it is. But that's still not enough time. Like for example, last season we had a rain fight that we homaged Grandmaster. And so the Grandmaster, they have a rain fight in the very beginning of the film. It took them 30 days to shoot that, and we did ours in 6 days, right? So we are definitely trying to emulate the Hong Kong style, but in a very, very compressed American TV schedule. And that's, again, reiterating, the only way to do it is with someone like Master Didi, who's just amazing and able to put it together in his head and jam it out quick. I don't know, actually. I mean, I can't complain. I mean, I really like Badlands and what it's doing for me, and as well as, it's gotten me other jobs on Tomb Raider and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's interesting. Like I don't really look, have built a 20-year career in Asia, and I'm looking at this career now in the States as something very different. It's almost like an extension of that career. And in some ways it runs parallel in that I'm trying to do the same thing as well, as not to be pigeonholed as just a martial arts actor, but to try and do other things. So Tomb Raider is interesting because they hired me on and it's not an action role at all. It's a strictly dramatic role. So I'll be able to prove that in that. I just did a movie, Geostorm, where I play a totally different character than Sunny. That's going to be out in October.